Sometimes it may seem like student athletes have it all. They're living the dream by competing on the main stage, while also getting to attend college tuition-free. Generally, these young people are well-liked, admired, and seem to find an instant community through their sport. But behind these shiny exteriors, there can be a lot more going on than meets the eye. According to the nonprofit organization Athletes for Hope, more than 1/3 of student athletes have experienced a mental illness at some point. This includes anxiety and depression, as well as eating disorders, burnout, and extreme stress. So, what's behind these staggering numbers?
We've had a pandemic that we've all had to deal with collectively, and that's led to an increase in mental health issues, really nationwide and worldwide. So that's one thing. And so those numbers have gone up, and we've seen that across the board. And athletics is really no exception. So student athletes are dealing with the things that we are all dealing with, but they also have unique stressors as well, and having to balance performing at a high level in sport, but also academically, it is unique to the student athlete population, and that can be overwhelming at times.
That's Dr. Julie Amato, a clinical and sports psychologist at Princeton University and Lafayette College. Amato highlights that student athletes are just as likely as non-athletes to experience mental health issues. However, the main difference is that they're much less likely to receive help. In a survey sent to student athletes by the NCAA, less than half the participants said they were comfortable seeking mental health services. With sports often celebrating those who push through the pain and suffer silently, many athletes feel ashamed if they seek out treatment.
I think there have been professional athletes across the board who have really stepped up and shared about their stories and experiences, and that's really helping to destigmatize. But I think one of the problems is that athletes are strong, they're tough, and they've had a lot of success ignoring pain, pushing through difficult things. And so that's a skill set that they have and possess, and that serves them very well in terms of their sport. But the problem is that because of that preference to take care of one's own problems and to push through and do it on your own, it can really backfire as it relates to mental health. So athletes have a tendency to either ignore or push things aside when really they could and should be seeking help sooner.
If the pressure of being a student athlete is so overwhelming, some might say, why not just quit? Amato says so few leave because there's a lot to lose. One big factor is the possibility of losing an academic scholarship. Oftentimes, many student athletes who leave the sport are forced to transfer to a more affordable university or end up dropping out of college entirely. With this abrupt shift, it's common to feel completely lost, and after years of grinding to make it to this level, the pull to stay is stronger than you might think.
If you've made it to the collegiate level in athletics, it's because obviously you're very good at it, but it's likely become a huge part of your identity and who you are. And so even though sometimes participation in sport can be a great source of stress, it's also a great source of joy. And I think, again, it's sort of ingrained in the athlete mindset that this is supposed to be hard. If it were easy, everybody would do it. So I think student athletes understand there's some degree of challenge and difficulty, and that's what they're drawn to in a sense. And so that tied with, this is such a huge part of my identity. I don't really know who I am or what I do without sport. I think that leads some athletes to stick with it even when it might be causing them distress.
And while this endless activity may factor into mental health struggles, it's also a great source of stress relief. According to the Mayo Clinic, doing as little as 10 to 15 minutes of exercise per day can improve your mood and help ease symptoms of depression and anxiety. For many athletes, playing the sport itself isn't the source of unhappiness. It's juggling all the demands that go with it. What makes these feelings worse is that some students feel like they can't speak up.
I think one of the number one things all coaches in athletic programs should be doing is right in the beginning of the season with the athletes returning, making sure that they know mental health is just as important as their physical health, that you're invested in their mental health, showing them what their resources are. Today at Princeton, I've hit all the fall sports teams and got out in front of them and introduced myself. I'm Dr. Julie. I'm your sports psychologist. Here's how you schedule appointments with me. So the coaches in the department really are the gatekeepers of that. And if they're out there saying, hey, we want you to talk to the sports psychologist, we want you to seek help when you need it, it gives the athletes permission then to do so, knowing that they're not going to be punished for that.
In particular, male athletes are the least likely to seek treatment out of fear of being perceived as weak or not masculine. To combat this hesitancy to ask for help, both the NCAA and universities across the country have expanded access to mental health services on campus and online. On the NCAA website, there's a handbook that details how to handle mental health crises for both players and coaches. As for individual colleges, many have hired more sports psychologists like Amato. These doctors have knowledge and experience in treating the specific challenges student athletes are facing. However, Amato notes that these programs can only work if they're backed by the coaching staff of each collegiate sport.
I think one of the most important things to keep in mind as you're a teammate, a friend out there, is that we all go through things. And there's not a person who walks the planet who hasn't been through some form of emotional pain or suffering. And so just checking in on people, asking how they're doing. If you notice that a friend or teammate is acting differently, maybe they're more withdrawn, a little more isolated, not being as social, or they're engaging in a lot of risk-taking behaviors that seem out of character for them, that might be alerting you to there's something wrong here. Or if they're talking about wanting to die or feeling so stressed out all the time, those are pretty big indicators that something might be going on for them. And it's always worth asking questions about how someone is doing. Don't be afraid to ask those questions.
And these mental health resources are also available for regular students as well. There's no stigma in asking for help. If you or someone you know is struggling with thoughts of suicide, you can dial 988 to reach the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. All calls are anonymous, and the hotline is open 24/7. For college students, mental health services are available on your school's student health portal or in person at the Student Health Center. To find out more about Dr. Julie Amato and all of our featured guests, visit viewpointsradio.org. For more behind the scenes, check out Viewpoints Radio on Twitter and Facebook. This segment was written and produced by Grace Galanti and Amira Zaveri. Our studio manager is Jason Dickey. I'm Marty Peterson.